Hawks has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
2016 Russia collusion hoax by asking foreign intelligence agencies to illegally spy on the Trump campaign.
Lucas Tomlinson in Washington with more. Lucas.
Good early morning, Carly and Todd. This report from Substack citing multiple unnamed sources claims the U.S. intelligence community asked foreign spy agencies to help spy on more than 24 associates of Donald Trump in the run-up to the 2016 election. It reads in part, quote, President Barack Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, had identified 26 Trump associates for the Five Eyes to target. A source confirmed that the IC had identified them as people to bump or make contact with or manipulate. They were targets of our own IC and law enforcement, targets for collection and misinformation. Now, the Five Eyes nations are the U.S., UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Here's one of the reporters, Michael Schellenberger, who spoke to Jesse Waters last night.
If this binder contains what we have been told that it contains, which may include raw intelligence, information showing that the U.S. government, the CIA and the intelligence community of the U.S. government, initiated the Russia collusion hoax, that it did not occur in the way that the official story, including the Durham investigation, had portrayed it, then that's extremely serious information.
The report was released at the same time House conservatives are preparing a bill that would reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that allows the government to collect communications from foreigners abroad. And today, the House Rules Committee is set to meet over that FISA reform bill, guys.
Welcome back to More War Monday, folks. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, the intelligence war, that's what it is. Stefan Halper and Alexander Downer. Remember those two names. That was the expose by today's guest when facts were recently declassified, like you just heard, about the intel operation that he was targeted by. For those of us who followed the story of what is now known as Obamagate, the intelligence op against Donald Trump, trying to paint him and key aides as Russian assets, we've seen these names many times as additional information has been revealed over about the operation throughout the years. They are tied to allied intelligence agencies that America routinely shares classified intel with through what is known as the Five Eyes program. The complex web of lies and deceit spun by these and U.S. intel operatives used information fabricated across every agency, and the storyline was maintained by the CIA and FBI until recently when President Trump and his team led by Tulsi Gabbard began declassifying the reports and information used in operations like the Crossfire Hurricane operation. My guest today to discuss the latest is the man that made that expose, as I said, found himself a target of Five Eyes and our intelligence services in their op. Former Trump advisor George Papadopoulos is the best-selling author of Deep State Target, How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down the President, named Donald J. Trump. George, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir. It's been about a year and a couple of days, I think, since you were last on.
Great to be with you, Colonel, and I'm glad we have the same suit on, so we're looking equal, Help.
Oh, absolutely,
so thanks for having me.
You're lucky. My wife makes me wear things. I just want to do this in a T-shirt.
Hey, my wife too. So our wives must think alike for sure.
They are thinking exactly alike, and we're better for it too. I guarantee it. Well. Absolutely. Just remind everybody, do me a favor and I don't even think we went into this the first time you were on, but Tell everybody, why were you a Trump advisor in the 2016 campaign? And what about your background led to that?
Yeah, Colonel, thank you for that question. So I started my career actually in Washington at a very young age. I think I was around 22 years old when I entered into the belly of the beast or the swamp, working with a lot of ex-Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush officials, basically people that are running the Pentagon and in some ways the White House under those three administrations, people like Scooter Libby, Douglas Feith, Seth Cropsey. These people were in one way or another some of the architects of the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. Obviously, Scooter Libby being the chief of staff that he was, had tremendous influence. So I was working with these people at a time when Make America Great Again was just something that you remembered Reagan talking about. There was no Donald Trump version of MAGA the way that obviously we know it exists now until he went down those escalators in the summer of 2015. So between the years of 2011 and 2015, I got my hands dirty in DC, worked on some very interesting projects in the Middle East and Europe with these people, including with energy, countries that are very sensitive: Egypt, Lebanon, Israel, Cyprus, Greece, Azerbaijan, Turkey, you name it. These were countries that, for years, I had been basically, working to find what a U.S. strategy towards those countries should be, especially during the Obama administration. So I felt that they were on the wrong side of history, however. And in the summer of 2015, I said to myself, I think it's time for change. I think America needs change. So I looked around and I looked at the various candidates and I said, who has the best chance to not only win, but also change the very fabric of what America is, its identity, its economics, its foreign policy. And there were two people that I saw running that caught my attention. That was Dr. Ben Carson and candidate Donald J. Trump. So I worked on Dr. Ben Carson's campaign first, and then I joined Donald Trump's campaign after that. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to the 7 years or so leading up to joining Trump's campaign and Ben Carson's campaign.
So is it because you were very knowledgeable of things like resources like energy and those kind of things, and in these sensitive countries, including Russia, that you think the deep state guys started targeting you to try to use you? And I'll just say this of what I think. They tried to use you and a couple of other people as the core methodology to fabricate this beginnings of this intelligence data that ultimately became what was used against you, Donald Trump, and others.
Yeah, Colonel, let's not forget what was going on under the Obama administration. We were basically living in a kangaroo court system back then, basically a banana republic. I mean, you had allegations and evidence that Obama was spying on journalists. He was spying on foreign governments. He was spying on members of Congress. So you have a person like myself that was working at a very, reputable powerhouse think tank, a conservative one, albeit during the Obama administration, basically trying to upend and change Obama's policies. We had a lot of influence in Congress. We had a lot of influence in Washington, D.C. We were bringing high-profile members of these governments to our think tank in D.C. So I think basically there was some sort of eye on me during those years, probably. Then, of course, I joined the presidential campaign season. I'm an advisor on Ben Carson's campaign. Ben Carson was actually the only candidate that was leading at one point against Donald Trump. That's something that people don't remember. He had a steady 10 to 12% of the electorate. And I would argue that it was his endorsement of Trump that helped Trump, obviously get the nomination later on and torpedo Ted Cruz's campaign because of the evangelical vote and all of these other factors that went into it. So basically, I think that there was some sort of surveillance of me during my time in DC, and that just followed me into these two presidential campaigns. And that's why at the beginning of your show, you showed how the CIA and these foreign governments were basically instructed to target people, to bump into them, to manipulate them. All of this stuff was happening to me before even the Washington Post had reported that I joined the Trump campaign. So clearly there was some sort of op, I believe, that was run against myself, people like General Flynn, others, likely going into 2015. And a lot of it, I would argue, starts in London, not in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and that's where one of those two names I mentioned in my monologue, and you've tweeted about, Stefan Halper, comes into play. That's what I know from a public information is where he enters the picture. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Stefan Halpern, and I don't want to speak for General Flynn, he's a friend and a patriot, but as far as my recollection serves me well, General Flynn had a run-in with this person in London as well, but in 2015, where they were basically trying to entrap the general with Halper and this person, Svetlana Lokova, who's a simple research associate that they tried to paint as some sort of Russian operative. And then what happens later on, then this guy Halper, he goes and tries to ingratiate himself within the Trump campaign. He's meeting with other people on the campaign, and he drags me or invites me to London at the heart of the presidential campaign season in September of 2016. And not only does he invite me to London for meetings and to spy on me with this research associate of his, but the British government itself, this is something that most people don't know about, but the British government, the same exact week that Halper was running an op against me with a foreign intelligence operative, this person, Osra Turk, the foreign ministry of the United Kingdom was rolling out the red carpet for me. I was meeting with their number two at their Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Tobias Ellwood. He later would almost serve as the Minister of Defense of the UK. Various other diplomats at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this whole notion that there would be an op run against me in their capital while they're making me visit them and they did not know about it or weren't directly involved, I think is absurd.
Yeah. So Halper, it's come out now that the CIA was basically running him, but is he an MI6 agent or some other type of character in this Five Eyes business?
So he was extremely close with the former head of MI6, Richard Dearlove. He was also a professor at Cambridge University, or I even think the director at one of these groups at Cambridge University. So I believe, given his role in the UK, his close relationship with MI6, and his position at Cambridge University, it was more likely than not that he was either directly affiliated with MI6 or they were running this op with him in London against me. And then he was passed off to the FBI for any domestic surveillance that he conducted against other members, probably like Carter Page and some others in the United States.
I got to ask you this now that you brought up the FBI. Have you seen in the documents released any direct operational connection between the CIA and the FBI in this? Because obviously somebody had to have the hammer on this. And I use that phrase as an ex-military guy. Somebody's got to be running the operation and giving direction and redirection too when necessary. Is that been revealed yet?
Let's just look what just happened a couple days ago, Colonel. It was CIA Director Ratcliffe who presented evidence against Bolton that created this raid that the FBI conducted on Bolton's home. So the CIA and the FBI obviously are close partners. The CIA usually or legally cannot conduct operations domestically, but they have a lot of things that they could do abroad. So what happens if you have an American abroad, let's say in England, in Italy, in Israel, in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, one of these allied countries, one of these Five Eyes countries, those people can then be legally targeted by these foreign governments circumventing the United States Constitution. And that's why if you actually look at the entire situation, besides the monologue and the 21 people that were targeted by the CIA that you reported earlier, Christopher Steele was an MI6 operative. Alexander Downer the so-called Australian diplomat that I reported to the FBI because I thought he was spying on me at the meeting I had with him, and I testified under oath to Congress about this guy. He was affiliated as well with Five Eyes Intelligence and actually had his own spying scandal while he was foreign minister of Australia against the island of East Timor. So both of these people were key impetus to actually launch a domestic FBI investigation. So without these people, you would never have Crossfire Hurricane. So that in and itself is the evidence, at least publicly that we know about, of foreign intelligence instigating the FBI's investigation and obviously their coordination thereafter.
Well, that's a good place to take a break. When we come back from this commercial break, George, we'll see a clip from Tulsi Gabbard talking about manufactured evidence. I want to keep pulling the thread on this because I think it's critically important the American people understand what happened from somebody that's inside the target ring with the crosshairs on them. And that's George Papadopoulos. We'll be right back.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
There's no question in my mind that this intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered be published, which contained a manufactured intelligence document. It's worse than even politicization of intelligence. It was manufactured intelligence that sought to achieve President Obama and his team's objective, which was undermining President Trump's presidency and subverting the will of the American people. So yes, next week we will be releasing more detailed information about how exactly this took place and the extent to which this information was sought to be hidden from the American people, hidden from officials who would be in a position to do something about it. And that's really the point here that I think is most important, Maria, and you said it in your opening. Accountability is essential for the future of our country, for the American people to have any sense of trust in the integrity of our democratic republic. Accountability, action, prosecution, indictments for those who are responsible for trying to steal our democracy is essential for us to make sure that this never happens to our country again.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about the intelligence war. And really the war on Donald Trump, the war on my guest today, who is the author of a book called Deep State Target, George Papadopoulos. And George, Gabbard is talking about the intelligence community assessment on Russia that Obama drove starting in early December of 2016. Officially, but unofficially, there was you could see that Hillary Clinton was talking about what may be in this thing. In the debate that she had with Donald Trump in October of that year. But that is the culmination, that point in time, the ICA really is the culmination of a 2-year operation, isn't it? Intelligence operation. You mentioned Christopher Steele before the break and Alexander Downer and the CIA and FBI connections to those. So they've been working on this using manufactured evidence for a long, long time. And then even their interactions with you and General Flynn and others, they've used to manufacture all of these, this picture, so to speak. Do I have that correct?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And what DNI Gabbard basically articulated is that the intel agencies created this conspiracy to basically criminalize diplomacy with Russia. I believe that the war that was instigated between Ukraine and Russia, that has cost millions of lives and is basically going to probably partition Ukraine forever, was in the works should Clinton have won the election. And that's exactly why when candidate Trump and his team basically just said that we don't want World War III with Russia, we should seek peace with Russia, economic deals, fight radical Islam with Russia, and stop a close relationship with Russia and China, which was basically the logic of what President Trump was discussing regarding a so-called relationship with Russia. They then used that, meaning the intel agencies and MI6, Five Eyes, other countries in NATO, I believe Italy as well, Ukraine themselves, in order to dirty up people around Trump to say he's saying this, meaning candidate Trump is saying what he's saying here for two reasons. One, because he's allegedly in the pocket of Putin. Remember how they were talking about deals and all that kind of insanity that the mainstream media was running with, and that his advisors are doing the same exact thing. But the problem is, Colonel, we're patriotic Americans. We love America and we're America first. Any logical conclusion from anything that we ever advised Trump on, any of his advisors, was always to put America always in a position of power and to negotiate from a position of strength. And in order to then disabuse that, they had to go around and create a conspiracy around myself, around General Flynn, around Carter Page, around the president by using Western intelligence figures like Downer, like Christopher Steele, like this guy Halper, like Joseph Mifsud, like others that the CIA was running that we probably don't even know about up until this point, in order to then feed fake information back to the FBI to say, hey, our foreign allies and our CIA partners are hearing X, Y, and Z. They're saying that Papadopoulos is saying this in London. They heard that Flynn said this in London, and that Carter Page is trying to secure billions of dollars in deals with Russia. So there must be something there along with what Trump is saying. Let's go after them. That's what I believe really happened here. And it was all in order to assure that the gravy train continued into U.S. aid, into all of these NGOs that Clinton was part of, the Clinton Foundation, to start the war, to send the billions of dollars to Ukraine that would then end up being laundered back to the Democrats, as they have been under Joe Biden. And Donald Trump stopped all of that. And the problem now that the Democrats and the FBI and the CIA and Clinton have is that President Trump has patriotic Americans in positions of power who are ready to take this all the way. And by going all the way, that means indictments, arrests, and I believe ultimately convictions.
That's another question I had for you is, do you think that's a serious effort on the American side? And then the follow-up will be, is there a way that these foreign intelligence operators, whether they're by informant or a unofficial relationship, and they're just being used or contracted, like Halper and I believe Downer was contracted to the CIA, to be honest with you, through his country's intelligence organization. Do you think there's any chance at real accountability for those individuals?
I absolutely believe so. And I think that this is the most sensitive aspect of the entire scandal. Dealing with the FBI and imbeciles and corrupt people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page is easy. Defrauding a FISA court, people like Jim Comey, defrauding a FISA court, withholding exculpatory evidence, a conspiracy to defraud U.S. citizens of their civil liberties, a conspiracy to basically spy illegally on a presidential campaign. These are all crimes that are, I think, really easy to prove. And I think that they will be prosecutable. The issue now is going to be, and if you actually look at what Kash Patel and DNI Gabbard have been doing over the last 3 weeks, they've been posting about a lot of trips to Australia and the UK. Just look at their X account over the last 2 weeks. I don't think that they're out there getting fish and chips or catching the Sydney Opera. I believe that they're there because they're having these face-to-face talks that include classified information about what the Obama administration, likely CIA Director Brennan, people like Haspel in the CIA office in London, were instructing these governments to do. And it's going to take a lot of courage, a lot of gumption, and probably equally as important as that, explaining to the American people that the Obama administration basically used our foreign allies to do their dirty work. And that is a serious issue that's going to affect bilateral relations. It's going to affect likely the Five Eyes intelligence security agreement. You might have laws written and passed in Congress that are codified, that change how intelligence relations are used moving forward. So this is why this is going to take a big effort. But with shows like yours, with people like myself who live this story, explaining it, I hope in a very simple way, I think it's going to create the traction and the momentum for people like Patel and Gabbard and Ratcliffe to explain to the American people really what happened and not be afraid to do it and not simply go after people like Comey and Brennan and Strzok, because if they do, that's fine, but you'll never understand the origins of what really happened and why it happened. And if we really want to rewrite history with facts and assure this never happens again, the American people deserve the full story.
Oh, they do. And you mentioned Haspel, who I hadn't brought up yet, but she. Correct me if let me just make sure this fact is correct, because I've seen it all over the internet for years now. Was she, in fact, in charge of the CIA operation in London at the time that you were being surveilled and brought over there by Halper? And I think, what's the Russian lady's name? Svetlana. I can't pronounce her last name now. The woman that was attempted to be tied to General Flynn in an illicit relationship, if I remember it correctly. Haspel was running the CIA there, right?
She was. And the woman is Filana Lokova. So she was running the CIA, attaché office in London. And I want to make it something very clear, too, to the audience. Before this infamous meeting I had with Downer, I was approached out of the blue via email initially by two U.S. Embassy officials in London, at the U.S. Embassy in London, that then later met with me. One was the defense attaché, and the other was the Navy attaché. Now, if anybody knows about the diplomatic corps or the positions that I'm talking about here, these are very senior level people, especially in London, working at the U.S. Embassy. They basically represent the Army and the Navy of the United States government to the UK government. So they're very high up there. And they were meeting with me and probing me. And then shortly thereafter, a couple days after, I have Downer and the Australians and all this setting this bizarre meeting in motion. So I believe Haspel had her finger on the pulse of this thing from the very beginning. And it's very strange that she has escaped the kind of scrutiny thus far that I believe she should have if we're going to really discuss this story thoroughly.
Yeah, and there's another group of people, George. We have to take a break here in about a minute, but there's another group of people that are escaping scrutiny, and Haspel's a good example of that. And that's people that have Republican Party ties or ties to Republican administrations more than they do Democrat administrations. And I think there's a large portion of the establishment Republican community that continues to oppose Donald Trump and will try to retake power in the party as soon as they are able. They think they are able to, and they are still today pushing back within the political party, trying to keep his power at a minimum, even though he's taken some great moves to take over the party from the leadership level all the way down at the national level, all the way down to the state level. But you've always got all those cats and dogs running around out there. Well, we got to take a break. I want to talk when we come back. We're going to see some stuff on Russia and everything. We'll get into that, but I want to get your opinion on and your thoughts about John Bolton's arrest, or not arrest, but the raid on his office and his home, and what his role in this may in fact be. We'll be right back with George Papadopoulos.
Concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith. We are trying to negotiate as much as we can with both the Russians and the Ukrainians to find a middle ground to stop the killing. I think what the president has tried to do here is try to engage in very aggressive, very energetic diplomacy, because this war is not in anyone's interest. It's not in Europe or the United States' interest. We don't think it's in Russia or Ukraine's interest to keep going. So we're going to keep on pushing for a diplomatic solution. And one final point about this, Kristen, if you look historically, whenever you have a complicated war with a lot of death and destruction, it kind of goes in fits and starts. There are hills and valleys to the negotiation. We sometimes feel like we've made great progress with the Russians, and sometimes, as the president has said, he's been very frustrated with the Russians. And we're going to keep on doing what we have to do to bring this thing to a close. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think that we're going to continue to make progress, but ultimately, whether the killing stops, that determination is going to belong to whether the Russians and the Ukrainians can actually find some middle ground.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about the Intel War. And what you just saw there is a key piece to this discussion today with my guest, George Papadopoulos, who's the author of the book Deep State Target, and found himself in the crosshairs on the target of the intelligence operation to smear Donald Trump and his associates to prevent him, first, I believe, from taking power, second, I believe, from wielding power effectively, and third, I believe, to impeach him and remove him from power and ultimately put him in prison for the rest of his life. That is what the operation looks like to me. And George, welcome back. Before we dive too much further into Ukraine and Russia, which you have already tied to this very effectively, and I'm glad you tied that this war to this effort on the intel agency's part at the very beginning, because it has been involved. The intel agencies have been pushing this for over a decade now, and that's why all these killings are happening. But I mentioned John Bolton before we went to the break, and others on the Republican side of this, and Gina Haspel was also mentioned in that. What do you think of Bolton, the raid on Bolton? And we know that he was, I believe, the national security advisor when the Vindman fake whistleblowing happened that resulted in the first impeachment over the Ukrainian president's call with President Trump. So it's all woven in here together. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts on this Bolton issue are and where that might lead.
Yeah, I think that nothing is occurring in a vacuum here. So you really have to look at it as part of a bigger puzzle. Let's focus on Bolton for a second. What basically the Democrats and the Trump haters have managed to accomplish and to show the world is that they are hand in glove in projection when it comes to criminal acts. Everything that they have actually accused President Trump of doing, whether it's Hillary Clinton talking about relations with Russia, or Joe Biden discussing quid pro quo and alleged bribes, or John Bolton discussing the legalities behind holding classified information in a reckless manner. All three of these people have now either been directly accused themselves, been under criminal investigation for it, or have been raided for the exact same things that they had accused President Trump of doing. Now, Bolton, we don't know how deep the scandal goes with Bolton. What we do know, according to reports, is that he was emailing classified information recklessly when he had absolutely no authority to even hold on to classified information after his security clearance was stripped and the security detail was stripped. He was emailing his family on his private server classified information. He was also allegedly selling that classified information to the highest bidder in countries like Qatar and other frenemies of the United States. Could have been even enemies or adversaries of the United States. We don't know. But what President Trump did say is that not only is he a sleazeball, meaning Bolton being a sleazeball, but he might have been acting in a very unpatriotic way. I read that they have Bolton in their sights for selling classified information to either frenemies or direct enemies of the United States in order to undermine President Trump's administration.
Wow, that's stunning to think about that. I mean, I honestly, George, I can't tell you the number of activists that are Trump supporters. I mean, our team. That really highly regard John Bolton, even to this day. But what got my attention on him was that initial Ukraine call impeachment and him allowing Vindman to disobey orders, to not come out and support the president, Bolton himself, and squash that immediately and letting it continue. Do you think there are others like him involved heavily in this classified side from the non-Democrat side, the Trump-hating Republican world, that might be revealed at all, just to get your opinion on where that lay of the land might be?
Yeah, look, I'm currently in Italy right now, and what I have been hearing from sources in this country, in Italy, is that the Italian government had some very sensitive information that they presented to Secretary of State or CIA Director at the time, Pompeo, regarding some evidence that they found about Russiagate that would have actually helped President Trump to basically stop the investigation of Mueller and to basically end every attempt to overthrow his administration in its tracks. But Pompeo, like Bolton, who also had classified briefings about Brennan's attempt to basically conjure up the Russia scandal, even though we now know people were pushing back against it, these two people were actually withholding this information from the president. So what I'm basically trying to say here is that you had Trump's national security advisor during his first term and his Secretary of State / CIA director intentionally withholding information from him, which would have basically stopped any investigation into him, into his advisors, and helped bolster his standing into the midterms in 2018, which the Democrats obviously took over based off of Mueller and all of these fake stories and allegations and how the media ran with it. So I believe those two people were intentionally working to subvert Trump. I think that's the reason why Trump did not hire Pompeo or have him anywhere near his administration this time around, either directly or indirectly. And I think President Trump also learned DC. I think he now knows who he can trust, who he can't trust, what he wants to accomplish, and how he's going to accomplish that. Is he going to take a more hands-on approach to diplomacy, or is he going to allow those responsibilities to be delegated to people like Bolton and others? I think if you just look at how President Trump is acting as an executive this time around, he's 100% hands-on. He's now solved 7 wars in 7 months. He just signed a new free trade agreement with South Korea. He's ending the war with Ukraine and Russia, and he doesn't even need his national security advisor or his secretary of state to do the heavy lifting because he now knows how to operate on the global stage. People like Rubio, people like Witkoff, all of these people, DNI Gabbard, Ratcliffe, these are all people that he selected for this moment in history. And this moment in history was going to either take America down a very dark path, so Harris have won, or bring us into the golden age, which we are now embarking upon. So that's kind of where I see President Trump now versus 2016, especially in terms of the personnel.
Yeah, that's a great segue because the next thing I wanted to get your opinion on is the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I know a little bit about the economics there and the cultural issues between Christians, non-Christians, and those kind of things. But I think that's one of the deals that's not getting much notice, but was probably one of the hardest to pull off. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. You know that area very well, especially from the energy perspective and the goings-on between those two countries. What do you think?
No, Colonel, you're absolutely right. This was an intractable conflict for 30 years. It basically was going on since the collapse of the Soviet Union, in which when borders changed, you had this Armenian enclave in Nagorno-Karabakh created within what was later recognized as Azerbaijan. The international community did not recognize Nagorno-Karabakh, even though historically it had been populated by a predominant Christian Armenian population. Then, of course, you had this war. The Armenians initially won, and they were backed by Russia. Moving forward, what became very interesting is that Azerbaijan discovered a lot of natural gas in the Caspian Sea. This is something that I actually was working on as one of my projects when I started my career in DC. The Caspian Sea, just so your viewers understand, is one of the most energy-rich seas in the entire world. It's so vast in resources that Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan and Iran and Russia control that it is now even considered an alternative corridor for energy to the European Union and other countries, which historically had only been dependent on Russia. And of course, now you have the United States. So this issue had been going on for 30 years. Thousands and thousands of people have been killed. Millions have been displaced over the years. No one thought it would ever be solved. But what happened? President Trump not only solved the issue, but he brought the two leaders, after they were just engaged in a war last year, to the White House to sign a peace agreement, which is going to forever ossify the borders of these two countries, create a U.S. presence in the Caucasus in a real manner for the first time in decades, and hedge against Russia's influence and Iran's influence all simultaneously. So that's really why that peace agreement is a big deal. And like you said, it's really not getting enough attention because of obviously Ukraine and Russia. But I would argue that Trump's ability to get this peace agreement and to basically, undermine Putin a bit in the Caucasus, allow the United States to then negotiate from a position of strength against Putin when it came to the discussions with Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go to the break, I have to ask you about China, though. You did not mention them, but from a strategic perspective, a little bit wider perspective, what's the impact on China's efforts to continue to make inroads into all of the Middle East through that area?
Yeah, so what we're going to see moving forward over the next 10 years, I believe, and especially during the Trump administration, is going to be competition with China over new trade routes and energy routes. China's One Belt, One Road versus the IMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which the Trump administration and even the Biden administration had supported. What Trump wants to do is to basically do two things. He wants to separate Russia from China in order to have stronger negotiating leverage against China when it comes to any potential free trade agreements or trade agreement that he'll have with China. He He wants to bolster Taiwan for the same exact reason, and he wants to bolster India because India is a hedge against China. That's why Trump invested heavily in his relationship with Modi. That's why India is now producing a lot of this low-skilled stuff from Apple iPhones, not Apple iPhones, but parts of what Apple's doing, other issues, and why the United States is investing in India because they want to create a hedge against China. So if you just, I want your viewers just to Google these because if they look at it visually, they'll understand a little better. One Belt, One Road, China versus the IMEC corridor. And these are the issues I think that the Trump administration is actually looking at very closely when it comes to their bilateral relationship with every country along these new corridors. And China right now is actually feeling the most isolated it's been probably in the last 10 years or so. Russia now is coming back into having a potential relationship with the United States. The Europeans are now signing massive trade agreements with the United States. South Korea just signed a massive trade agreement with the United States. Security arrangements are coinciding with these trade deals, while previously China had been taking advantage of these countries under the Biden regime. So it's not looking good for China. And I believe the way that Trump negotiated from a position of power against Putin, he's going to do it a lot more against China with all of these various deals that we've been discussing this show.
Absolutely. I think you tied it up very nicely. We got to take our last break, George, but we'll focus on Russia, Ukraine, but keep in mind that all of this, I believe, like George has said, is aimed at deterring China and weakening them and re-strengthening the United States of America. We'll be right back with George Papadopoulos on More War Monday, the Intel War.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
I think that is where the fruit, if we ultimately solve this thing, that's where the fruit of an agreement will come.
I want to get to security guarantees, but very quickly, if Russia is allowed to keep any of the territory that it illegally seized, what message does that send to China? Does it give China a green light to invade Taiwan? Does it give Russia a green light to invade other European countries, which is what your European allies are concerned about?
Well, first of all, the Ukrainians are going to ultimately make the determination about where you draw the territorial lines in their own country. But, Kristen, this is how wars ultimately get settled. If you go back to World War II, if you go back to World War I, if you go back to every major conflict in human history, they all end with some kind of negotiation. We're actually not active parties in the negotiation. We're effectively mediating. We're trying to mediate the Ukrainians and the Russians to come to some agreement. If the Ukrainians are willing to say something on territory that brings the conflict to the close, we're not going to stop them. We're also not going to force them because it's not our country. We're trying to play a constructive role. The president is trying to play a constructive role to bring peace to the region, but he's not going to force these parties to walk through the door. All he can do is open the door and ask them to negotiate in good faith.
You talk about security guarantees.
Sure.
Foreign Minister Lavrov discussed the importance of Russia being a part of security guarantees. Ukraine says that's a non-starter. Is that a non-starter for the United States as well? How can Russia secure Ukraine when it's dropping bombs on
There's
Ukraine?
a little bit of a talking past each other here. First of all, we're not talking about security guarantees until after the war has come to a close. And of course, the Russians are going to be a part of the conversation about bringing that war to a close. So, of course, they're going to have some stake in this. They're going to talk about this. That doesn't mean that they're going to have troops in Ukrainian territory, but how can you reasonably provide security guarantees without talking to the Russians about what would be necessary to bring the war to a close? So I think there's a little bit of people talking past each other. This is going to be a security guarantee provided by a host of nations. I think the Europeans are obviously going to play a big role. We think there are other countries all over the world that might play a big role. The Russians are going to be involved because they're the critical party that's necessary to stop the killing. Again, this is how negotiations happen. It's this give and take. It's a conversation between both sides.
Very quickly, before I move to domestic issues, for Americans who are watching, can you guarantee no U.S. boots on the ground as a part of these security guarantees?
The president's been very clear. There are not going to be boots on the ground in Ukraine, but we are going to continue to play an active role in trying to ensure that the Ukrainians have the security guarantees and the confidence they need to stop the war on their end. And the Russians feel like they can bring the war to a conclusion on their end. It's complicated, Kristen, but we're going to keep on trying to play these parties. We're going to keep on trying to convince these parties to talk to each other and continue to play the game of diplomacy, because that's the only way to get this thing wrapped up.
All right, let's talk about some domestic issues now. This week you were in Georgia. You were there to...
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday here on Worldview Tube, and my guest is George Papadopoulos, author of Deep State Target. Well, a lot of people don't really remember, and I had him talk about it at the beginning of the show, that George is an expert in resources, especially energy resources, the economies and the geopolitical situation in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, Asia, and the Caucasus, all of that part of the world. And George, welcome back. And I just wanted to devote this segment to the peace deal and just say that no other person other than Donald J. Trump could get the situation of where we're at. And if he had not declassified all of this information and start getting the truth out about what happened to people like you and General Flynn and Svetlana and Carter Page, all of that table setting would not really be able to happen. And I just wanted to get your take on the emerging peace deal here. There's a lot of talk about territory in the Donetsk and Donbass area that Russia wants and that they're willing to give up. And Vance said it a couple times there. They've made a lot of concessions that they weren't willing to make previously. And I think it's because the president has set this table, as you said, from a position of strength. And part of the releasing all this information is that. But let's talk about what is the real challenge between Ukraine and Russia on that border as to where those lines eventually fall from your perspective?
Yeah, Colonel, first thing is first, I absolutely agree with you. The Obamagate was designed to criminalize diplomacy with Russia. Without these files being declassified and presenting a true picture of the situation, and that basically showcased that Russia was basically a victim of this hoax as much as Donald Trump and the American people, we probably would not have a summit in Alaska. Because the way that the mainstream media and the intel agencies and members of Congress utilized the fake story, it was impossible to even have a phone call between President Trump and President Putin. So now that this is all slowly but maturely being cleared, we're starting to see the fruits of that. And it's starting to showcase that peace, business relationships, and potentially security partnerships between the United States and Russia are possible. When it comes to the Ukraine conflict, what is the United States' interest? The United States' interest is not to spend $250 billion plus in Ukraine for an endless war between Russia and Ukraine, which has done nothing but engage further killings and in exchange of territories. Donald Trump is very cognizant of this. He has signed a $1 trillion rare earth mineral deal with Zelensky. This in and itself is a de facto security and economic partnership that the United States now has with Ukraine. The minerals in the east, in Donetsk and Lugansk, and the areas in which the Russian military currently occupies are rife with rare earth minerals to the tune of $1 to $2 trillion. That's really why the Russians want that territory. And they utilize the excuse, maybe it's not an excuse, that those are ethnic Russians there. They're Russian speaking people that have been living in the eastern part of Ukraine, that feel Russian, that want to be part of Russia. And Zelensky was bombing those people. Zelensky tried to renege on the Minsk agreements, which would have created an autonomous zone in the east, prevented Ukraine from joining NATO, and stopped the war from ever even starting. So if you just look at the facts, Zelensky's really the one to blame here, along with the European Union and the Biden administration, because they went against the UN-sponsored Minsk agreements. They also helped overthrow the government of Ukraine in 2014 when Obama was president, that created the invasion of Crimea by the Russian president. So when there's a conflict with Ukraine, it's not President Trump starting it. With Russia, it's President Obama and President Biden. President Trump says it best. This isn't his war. This is Joe Biden's war. This is Obama's war. He's just here to solve it. And the only way you're going to solve it is by focusing on economics and security guarantees that don't involve U.S. men and women in uniform putting their lives at risk. And that's exactly what seems to be what's going to happen. But if Zelensky comes to the negotiating table, accepts the reality on the ground, which was basically the Minsk agreement at the UN, and that is autonomy in the East, some sort of recognition for Russian speakers, ethnic Russians in the East, and no NATO accession. If he accepts that, I think this war ends tomorrow. Will his handlers allow him to say it? That's the question that millions of people's lives depend on.
Yeah, that is the question. And the underlying question about that is, who are his handlers? And I think it goes back to right to the heart of what you've been talking about here, George, and that is, the intelligence agencies that started this whole thing well before Donald Trump even came down the escalator, really, in my opinion. And it has all centered around Ukraine and Russia. Well, I hope that the president's team has their eye on the right targets. It appears they do. And I appreciate you coming on today. I know you got a heart out here. Just push the book here. Tell everybody what your coordinates are. And I hope to have you back soon I'm sure we're going to get more breaking news on this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Colonel. It's always great to be with you. And I'll just add one last thing. We've been talking a lot about the UK here today. It was the UK Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson, 2 years ago, who told Zelensky, don't sign a peace agreement, keep fighting. The UK has been in this since day one. So you could find me, for all your viewers who are interested in following my work and updates. I'm very active on X at GeorgePapa19. And the book, once again, Deep State Target, How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down President Trump.
Well, thank you, George. Have a safe one. We'll see you again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. We are going to have Training Tuesday tomorrow. Caleb Gilbert's going to be my guest. He is the CEO of a company that does security, personal security for senior leaders. The Secret Service failed to protect Donald J. Trump when he was the Republican nominee for president last year. And they really haven't done that great a job, in my opinion, of publicizing what they've learned and what went wrong and the changes that they've made to guarantee that they can get past any partisanship, any ideological baloney, and be able to protect the president, the vice president, their families, and all the other things that the Secret Service has to do. So we're going to go in depth with the solutions that Caleb Gilbert comes up with and provides all around this country to senior leaders of major corporations. And the Secret Service can learn a thing or two from this gentleman. And I hope that one of them sees the show tomorrow and we get that. We're on the road to peace in Russia and Ukraine. I will be staying in the after audio show on X for a few minutes in the space. to help answer questions that people may have. And I enjoy that. I do that most every day. So come join us there from the end of the video broadcast until at least 30 minutes when I'm able to do it for the after show. I'm Rob Maness, and I'll see you tomorrow on Training Tuesday.